else to get united. Like, what we gotta do is meet everybody on 149th Street at the bench.
So you've been doing graffiti for a little while now, and you're feeling a little confident, but negative space management is something that you're completely stumped on. You struggle with it when it comes to your pieces, or maybe even your hand styles. Well, in today's video, I'm going to be talking all about negative space management as well as flow, because the two kind of go hand in hand. But we're also going to take things a step further, and we're going to talk about a slightly more advanced technique where you're able to contrast different parts of your letter structure with different elements in your piece, and what that means for some of the fundamentals as well. And also, you'll be able to find the guy's link in the description down below if you want to go ahead and check him out. But let's not waste any time, let's hop right into things. So something I see a lot of new graffiti artists, or even slightly advanced graffiti artists, worry about is negative space management. They want to get rid of it at all costs. And I can't necessarily blame them, because typically graffiti runs a pretty tight negative space management, and there's a reason for that. The reason is because running your letters closer together enhances flow. It helps you to flow one letter to another. But what you gotta keep in mind is negative space is responsible for allowing your letter structures to actually exist in the first place. So let's check out this first piece here. When we look at it, we'll see that he's got a lot of negative space here between the R and the I, and he's got a lot of negative space here between this area of the K. And if he didn't have 3D going over to the left, then he would also have a lot of negative space in these areas right here. And it's because of this negative space that the letter structures are actually able to exist. You see, the exact polar opposite is happening, and it's staring at us right in the face with the letter C right here. And that's because he pretty much got rid of all of the negative space here in the center of the C. It has almost no negative space at all, and as a result, it lacks a lot of letter structure. And that's the beauty about negative space, is you can go ahead and do a lot of crazy things with it. You can take away a lot of negative space and keep your letters really, really tight together. Somebody like Saber does this quite a bit, and this enhances flow. Or you can add a lot of negative space, and this gives you more letter structure most times, but it gets rid of a lot of flow. So in a piece where he's got a lot of negative space in many different areas, how does he maintain flow? Well, he does that with line uniformity and similarity. And to explain that just a little bit, line uniformity and similarity pretty much describes how when you have two lines that are uniform or similar, and these lines happen to be close to one another, then those two lines flow together. But if these two lines are separated by a large distance, then they tend to lose that ability to flow. So for example, he has this diagonal line which is pretty much uniform with this over here. But these two lines can't flow together because of how far apart they are. So now it's the graffiti artist's mission in order to go ahead and link those two lines together with subsequent lines that are also uniform and or similar. And we can see him do exactly that throughout his piece here, where he has uniform or similar lines that help to link those two lines together, therefore enhancing his flow. But there's also a different way to flow. If you're running a lot of negative space in your pieces and you're finding that you're losing flow a little bit too much, more than you would like, then you could use letter uniformity and similarity in order to kind of mitigate that. Now, letter uniformity and similarity essentially is when you have a motif that appears in your image that appears in multiple areas. And this is not proximity based. So say for example, the tops of these letters, they're all pretty square. Well, that's a defining motif for the overall image. That's an aesthetic that he returns back to constantly, and that is not proximity based. Another great example is these serifs that he has on his R and his K, where you see one there and then you see the other one over here. That creates letter uniformity and similarity. Once again, not proximity based. They're on opposite sides of the name. Now, for those of you guys with a keen eye, you might be saying, if that's a serif, where's the I in his piece? Didn't you say there was an I in the beginning? And that's true. This right here is the letter structure for the I, but as you can see, he's running a really close negative space management with the IR combo, or the RI combo, which causes the I to lose a bunch of letter structure. This is really problematic for the I. The I can't survive like that. If we were to go ahead and say, for example, and we were to get rid of all this, well, now the I literally does not exist. So what does he do? How does he make that work? This is gonna end up turning into like a little bit of a lesson on me teaching you guys how to read wild styles, despite the fact that this is not a wild style at all, but it uses many of the same tricks as a wild style would. So as the graffiti artist, he's got to find a way in order to contrast something about the I's structure to everything else in the piece. So we go ahead and we compare this serif to this one over here. We can tell that there's a couple of differences. One is really narrow and really tall, as to where the other one's a little bit more stout. It's a little bit more wide and short. And we're like, all right, let's compare a little bit more. We notice that this serif has a chip on the top, and these chips occur multiple places throughout the piece. Okay, that's pretty easy to understand. What about this serif over here, right? It's got a chip on the top, and where else can we find that chip? Well, we find a rectangular one over here, we find another one over here, and two more over here. But those are a lot more narrow, they're a lot smaller, and they're not as like bombastic as this one is. Okay, well that's not exactly right. So we would then go back and look at the serifs, and we would say, okay, well now this is starting to make a little bit more sense. Now we can tell that, all right, this one being a little bit more narrow and a little bit taller is no mistake. That's intentional. That lets us know that this has to be letter structure as opposed to just a serif and a chip. This is kind of the process you go through, not only with creating wild styles, but also with reading wild wild styles. Now once again, I need to make this perfectly clear, especially for you newer graffiti artists. Not only is this an advanced thing to do, but this also is not a wild style. He's just implementing some of the same tricks. Now the issue with doing this is the fact that if you do this too much and you're not very careful with it, you can easily destroy a letter's structure doing that. He kinda gets away with it just because the letters are so simplistic and so separated from one another to where it's easy to see each definitive structure, although the eye is a little bit harder to do with that. But if you were to do a proper wild style and you were to pull off this same exact thing, your eye would likely completely be destroyed. For you more advanced graffiti artists, you can definitely try to contrast different elements of your pieces, or if you don't want to try it in your own work, you can try to break down wild styles and see if you can spot when people are doing this. Now with this piece here, there's no kind of trickery going on with the letter structures. Everything is really in your face and easy to read. But I wanted to share this one with you guys, that way we can kind of look at flow again, right? We can kind of examine how that's working, because once again, this is a really good example of how to link line uniformity and similarity through your entire piece in order to kind of help flow. But you'll notice something. The flow stops right there. So how does he handle that? How does he handle a flow that decides to shift from one direction to a different direction? Well, the answer is very simple. You can either over time change the flow by slightly changing direction, let's just say for example like this, or check out what he does here. He has the A shoot an extension over this way, which comes out here, maintaining the first direction of flow, but then he has the M shoot over an extension over this way, which goes for the new direction of flow, which then links over here. So he's kind of overlapping the flow in this area right here, which helps out a bunch. And this is exactly what I love about this guy's work, is he does it, he's not like a one-trick pony. He does different solutions for the same exact issue, because now when we check out the R, you'll notice it doesn't have that overlap at all. Instead, he found a different solution to the same problem. His R contains both flows at the same time, and it's really easy to do on the letter R because it naturally lends itself to that kind of duality, where you have one direction here with the stem of the R and the bowl, but then the leg of the R can do something different. As it extends outward, it's able to come back inwards with the other direction of flow. So now for his T, he literally could do whatever he wants. He can do either one. He can have the T face this direction, or he can go ahead and have it face the direction he has, which is this way. Either way will work. And I particularly love this extension here because it extends out from the bottom of the R specifically to help amplify the flow of the T with more uniformity. And of course, by now you know it goes without saying, this arrow flows with, well, that arrow right there, helping flow once again. Now check out this next piece here. See if you can see a lot of the stuff that we've taught already with the previous two. But let me go ahead and point it out for you real quick, for those of you guys who don't want to pause the video. Once again, we're looking at a lot of that same line uniformity that goes throughout his piece, right? That uniformity and similarity that's present throughout the entire bottom of his piece here. Not only that, we can look at the diagonal lines here in order to see once again a lot of the same stuff is happening. It's almost a little bit of an artist habit, as he's running pretty much the same lines and the direction for those lines as the previous piece we just looked at, and they work in much the same way. But if you notice, he does something that he did in the first piece, but he does to a very small degree in this one, and that is he got rid of the negative space here within the center of the M. The center of the M, this negative space that typically would be right here, helps to define not only this basic box, but this basic box as well for the structure of the letter M. In this, he decided to completely get rid of that, and he doesn't really need it because he has that right there. Now once again, keep in mind, for you newer graffiti artists, doing something like this is going to heavily distort your letter structures, and it could potentially destroy it. But he knows what he's doing, he understands how the letter functions, and he makes sure to do this in such a way that isn't going to destroy the structure. Here we see all of those same things exampled once again in a much different way, where he's got that uniformity, he's got the lack of structure here due to the lack of negative space, and he still has a ton of flow, not only with letter uniformity and similarity, but as we just previously showed, line uniformity and similarity as well. And then we got this piece right here. Once again, another prime example and a clear example of how he distorts the structure by having a lack of negative space for the eye, but then he rebounds on this by contrasting this huge motif with something that absolutely does not resemble anything else on the piece itself, which lets us know that this has to be letter structure, and therefore this can only be a letter I. Alright, I think that's a pretty good lesson on negative space management and how it works and all that good stuff. Dudes, if you want to learn more about negative space management or just graffiti's fundamentals in general, check out the best how to do graffiti tutorials right here in this top playlist. And we also have some books I've published, which are in the description down below, which teach a lot of graffiti's fundamentals as well. But if you want some more graffiti content, check out this playlist here on the bottom, and I'll catch you guys back here next week. Thanks for watching.